would like to have a chat about discourse structure characteristic of LLM, large language models, in particular baseline perversion and ordinary psychosis inherent to this discourse. It just runs in parallel with capitalist discourse within Lacanian formulation. Let us dive into it. So, briefly, a lot of this information in great detail can be found on the web, on YouTube and so forth, but anyway, large language models are probabilistic models that predict the next token in a sequence conditioned by previous tokens. So it produces text on the basis of the text that has been input. These days it also does it on the basis of input sound, input video, input pictures, whatever you put into it. So, what are tokens? Tokens are not just words, they are word fragments, punctuation, parts of numbers or symbols. They are bits of graphics, they are fragments of sound, animation, whatever. So all these tokens are placed on vectors, so-called embeddings, which constitute high-dimensional vector space. So each token is given a value, and there is a certain amount of those tokens. I think it's over 50,000 or something within GPT models, and they record it, whatever. So they placed in a high-dimensional vector space, something like 12,000 dimensions within that space, where the proximity of tokens within the space amounts to similar usage and constitutes what we call meaning. This vector space encodes many aspects, called semantics, syntax, style, associations, etc. So the whole operation, how it's done, like I said, is better described in specific technical videos. It doesn't necessarily matter, apart from the fact that it illustrates that this process is nothing like human reasoning process. It's a computational model of associating, cross-comparing, defining the proximity and probability of input words in a sequence. It is done on the basis of very, very large amounts of data, and it is capable to generate text, video, visuals, sounds on that basis. Because of that complexity, it's context sensitive, produces long range dependencies, and apparent to us humans coherent. So, like I said, it is trained on massive corpora of data and then on human feedback. I think mostly it's known how it's trained. Large chunks of internet are put into the GPUs, graphic processing units, compacted or compressed into some sort of a zip file or whatever. Then they can relate within themselves this corpora of data and provide this next token in a sequence. But usually that next token is a hallucination or a dream, because it hasn't yet been finely tuned or trained with human feedback. So there's the fine-tuning or reinforcement-based learning, where humans actually put the questions and answers into the system, which programs it to give coherence, give answers which are helpful, not harmful, and truthful, hopefully. Human learning has a particular style. It gives the answers to questions in a confident style, which is what that system adopts when it communicates with a user. In case of a chatbot, it also provides the answers in a confident coherent style in the same way it has been trained. So it is trained to minimize prediction error, internalize statistical regularities. It learns all the structures which we associate with language, grammar, rhetorics, discursive styles, chains of reasoning which are typical. And it is adjusted in human feedback with safety constraints. There is a whole mechanism of safety within these bots. And it is then trained further and further, deeper and deeper through instructional learning. That much we know, that much is clear. Yeah. So, reasoning is not human reasoning, like I've already shaped. They do not think, obviously. It simulates argumentative forms of human speech. It's chains of thought and linguistic artifacts. It does not have introspection, does not have a mental process. It can improve with the explicit input given to it. And that's next step is where it gets interesting, because it makes confident errors and being very fluid in its own dream. It does not produce any discomfort when it encounters contradictions, it just carries on. And this is actually what makes large language models or natural language processing possible, because it has low tolerance to error. We'll compare the linguistic structure inherent to traditional computer science, which is based on largely Noam Chomsky's language model, and that which is used on LLMs, which is based on structural linguistics model, and see how that kind of learning within LLMs has only become possible when they become more tolerant to error. Okay. Particularly, I would like to speak about psychotic features of large language models, and yeah, let's dive into it. To dive into it, we need to actually first look into what is symbolic order, what is a linguistic system, how it operates, how it functions, how it's structured. So, like I already mentioned, structural linguistics originated by Ferdinand de Saussure, Roman Jacobson, and adopted by Jacques Lacan in his psychoanalytic seminars. This model made language processing within LLM possible, unlike the Noam Chomsky's model, which was utilized by traditional theoretical computer science back in the mid-20s, etc., because that was relied on kind of hard computation and really liked rules and really liked binaries, what is right grammatic structure, what is wrong grammatic structure. But natural language does not operate in this way. It doesn't care about grammar. Grammar is not even relevant to natural language. It arises just like semantics arise out of context. We'll look into how. So, what is language according to Chomsky and according to structural linguistics? Well, for Chomsky, language is a closed symbolic system with internal rules, mistyped roles, sorry. It has discrete functions operating on symbols. So many typos. Doesn't matter. This is why, this is because Chomsky wanted to explain how the human mind functions. That's what his language model was for. It wasn't for functionality. It was adopted by computer science because it has strictly formulated rules, which they could be utilized in that level of machinery back in the days. When the larger computational powers, such as GPUs, become available, well, this model has become obsolete. It actually made deep learning, machine learning, very slow. So According to Chomsky, grammar is prior to communication, yeah, and semantics are separate from the use. He wanted to break down things neatly. If a grammar is innate in humans, that's what he suggested, and within the grammatical structure, correct and incorrect grammar should be clearly discerned, treated as a binary. And in his opinion, linguists should study correct grammatic structures, ideal, not as they are in natural language, random or non-existent altogether. So structural linguistics has a very different approach. It says that meaning emerges from differences and oppositions of different linguistic units, which are called signifiers. This is known as the relationality of meaning. Structures such as grammar, syntax, semantic dependencies all arise in the process of usage. They're not innate to language. There are not innate rules that govern linguistic system. All the rules arise, they emerge relationally. Hence, the signifiers, these linguistic units, they are arbitrary. Their usage is indeterminate, depending on context, and they're devoid of semantic component. There is no inherent signified pertaining to the signifier. Within language, we observe, that's from Jacobson, paradigmatic and syntagmatic accesses. Substitution and proximity. This word can be substituted for that word, depending on the context, or this word is close in meaning to that word, which is very much helpful and very usable within the vector space. Metaphor and metonymy, gee, so many typos, govern a relational meaning within the discourse. So metonymy, sliding of signifiers, similar meaning, similar meaning, similar meaning. Metaphor, substitution of one meaning for another meaning in proximal context. Again, very convenient model for vector space. So, language is very much a system, according to structural linguistics, characterized by usage. How make communication possible? Well, meanings arise out of context. You need to actually figure out what this means for another person and what it means for yourself, what this word signifies particularly in this context. It does not have inherent signification. The word table does not have a rigid connection with its referent and does not have anything to do with the thing itself. It only has something to do with other signifiers within that chunk of text or chunk of data. Okay, this has turned out to be very helpful for large language models. As states here, they are based on structural linguistics, just as Lacanian psychoanalysis, for that matter. So, LLMs use such operations like token prediction, sequence modeling, metonymic sliding of the tokens along the chain to find proximal meanings to that. This is how it can predict next token chain. Statistical similarity can be roughly equated with metonymy. Just like in structural linguistic model, grammar, syntax, semantics all arise from interpolation of relations within this large matrix space of data. Something like what, 170 billion parameters exist within different blocks of matrices of GPT these days, or actually these days probably even more. So within this huge cloud, which was possible to actually compact and process and codify with the use of modern days GPUs, which is quite expensive, hence, but that's economics, we can access these chatbots. Okay. So, psychoanalysis uses the same model, free, not fee, free associating without concern for semantics, syntax, or appropriateness of what is being said. Analysant, client, creates the space of linguistic signifiers which produce meaning. This is how repressed unconscious signifiers come to the fore and create meaning retroactively. There is no inherent meaning there. Only when the signifiers are extracted from the unconscious are brought in the relation to other signifiers, which are conscious, meaning is known. There is no, following this model, there is no such thing as archetypal meaning, symbols, universal, signified, no collective unconscious. Everything is very particular for that particular individual within their particular context, within their psyche. So, yeah, well, Lacan is known as a big opposition to any sort of utilitarianism. There is no such thing as utilitarianism when it comes to subjectivity. Right. What is important is to discern that the network of signifiers, this sublinguistic matrix, which underlines speech, comprised of these units, tokens, which meaning is completely arbitrary, indeterminate, devoid of semantics. This layer of language, it has primacy over a layer which we know as the layer constituting meaning. This is very important as well for psychoanalytic praxis because unconscious is comprised of that sublinguistic matrix of the signifiers which have been repressed, and their relation within the unconscious produces symptoms, produces formations which arise, which are analyzed then. A bit of a historical background of how large language models, structural linguistics, psychoanalysis have something in common. Okay, we are still trying to look into why LLMs have psychotic features, and for that we need kind of a grip or grasp of the symbolic order, how it operates. Good illustration to how symbolic order is the unconscious. Lacan's famous maxim that unconscious is structured like a language at the level of signifiers is important to grasp here. Not at the level of signified, not at the level of speech or meaning. Speech and language are different things. Language is comprised of tokens, arbitrary units of difference, known as signifiers, and they can be subdivided in two kinds. This is not a strictly Lacanian development, although a lot in his corpus of writings alludes to it. But let's look into it. So, signifiers in relation and signifiers in isolation. Primarily, symbolic order is comprised of signifiers in relation. That's how they interact, that's how they gain meaning. And also this level constitutes the symbolic order of large language models, level of signifier and relation. As already been explained, they take meaning through differential position in a chain of signifiers or in a vector space. They're provisionally stabilized by so-called neo-dephasor, which is a specific signifier, and that's very important for the topic we're talking about, which we'll touch on shortly. Signifiers in relation can be repressed. Signifiers in relation, therefore, dominate in neurosis, because repression is a key mechanism within neurosis. So, Signifiers in isolation are quite different. They constitute the content of hallucinations, neologisms, somatic delusions. They are interesting. They are units of difference which are not in exchange within the network of the symbolic. They are kind of hovering, lost touch with the rest of the symbolic order. When they emerge, it is known they emerge like an eruption of meaning, which is seemingly divorced of a chain of the signification. And in case of large language models, that's the emergence of hallucinations, where the tokens are generated where there is unknown. So the eruption of signifier of isolation produces a sliding scale of signifiers in relation. That's slippage of meaning. And this is why we know that predominantly signifiers in isolation are found within psychotic structures where the name of the father is not functioning. These signifiers cannot be repressed. They are rejected or foreclosed. So name of the father is one of such signifiers for psychotics. They appear in fusion type subjectivities, perversion, psychosis, autism, and produce different kind of symptoms. For perverted subjectivity, it's a split of the subject that is produced. For autistic, it's the repetition, echolalia. Other symptoms, catatonia can be produced, or violent outbursts. For psychosis, of course, known symptoms such as delusions, hallucinations. Okay, now this very name of the father, Lacanian formula. This signifier structures the coherence of symbolic order in neurotics, which we call normal people neurotics. What is the name of the father? It is a signifier which has no meaning, divorced from meaning. It's an empty set, an X with an algebra, which anything that can be put there. It vouchsafes the place for emptiness, within the symbolic order, which makes symbolic order to have lack, or lack to function in the symbolic order. So, presence of the name of the father limits the associations. By the way, why it's called name of the father? Well, because of the prohibiting and naming function of the father in the process of Oedipus complex, the becoming of any subject, pretty much. The father's function is to prohibit, to instantiate lack, instantiate what we call castration within psychoanalytic jargon. Structural inability for fulfillment. So the function is limiting, and that's quite healthy. It limits associations, it prevents sliding of meaning along the relational signifiers. It has capacity to nail something, or put an end to something. It's in itself, it kind of is nonsensical, just like a prohibition, perhaps. Why can I not do that? Well, because I said so. That you would say. That makes no sense, but it works nevertheless. It creates consistency within the subjectivity, creates a limit. Limit is very important. This empty space that it provides holds the space for indeterminacy. This is where signifiers, the subterranean matrix within the symbolic, can function. Because if they are not functional, they are not guaranteed to function by the name of the father, what predominates is signified. The meaning predominates. And meaning is heavy. Meaning is heavy. Meaning has or leaves little options. One can get stuck in meaning. So, name of the father, as it functions in the neurotics, vouchsafes repression. for a signifier to be repressed, something needs to be substituted for it. Empty space should be there to substitute something for something else. This is why repression does not work within psychosis, because there is no empty space to substitute something for something else. Everything is full. There is fullness, there is no lack. That's why we also say that within psychosis there is no unconscious. It's externalized unconscious. Everything is on the surface. Obviously, the father vouchsafes the unconscious, a repository of the repressed signifiers in relation. Hence, they can be extracted from the unconscious. Repression and return of the repressed are the same, and put in the relation with other signifiers in the symbolic order. Which vouchsafes lack, obviously, the structural limit of signification, the inability of the word to touch upon the thing. We see how it does not function in psychosis, specifically on the example of schizophrenia. There, it is believed that signification can touch upon the thing, can touch upon the referent. There is no structural limit to signification. That's why within schizophrenia, symbolic is enjoyed as the real. Anyway, jargony. Let's go further. Free association as the key method of psychoanalysis is predicated on functioning of the name of the father and the signifiers in relation. So, like I already mentioned before, within this process a subject says everything with no regard to semantics, syntax, appropriateness. It gives emergence for the formations of the unconscious. Slips of the tongue, parapraxis, dreams. And dreams, by the way, are only isolated and studied and analyzed in order to find those particular tokens which have been repressed. The meaning of the dreams is irrelevant. So, when those signifiers emerge, the constitutive elements further associated and the repressed is being recovered, and then integrated within the symbolic. This process is known to uproot the pathomechanism of neurotic suffering. Yeah. This is the classic method of psychoanalysis, as designed, developed by Freud, as picked up by Lacan, as practiced widely in this day and age. However, this method is not applicable for psychosis, perversion, and autism, because their psyche functions on a different basis, because this name of the father is foreclosed or partially foreclosed in those subjectivities. That's a different topic. Okay, why do I mention this when we talk about large language models? Well, because the name of the father is also absent within large language models. It is foreclosed. So, here we have a computational difficulty, or encoding difficulty, I would say. Emptiness cannot be encoded within a vector space. Even a zero value vector within the matrix has a determined value. It can enter exchanges, transformations, can be attended to. What can be encoded within these models are only functional gaps. And these are used to reduce the amount of hallucinations within large language models. Masked positions, tokens excluded from the attention mechanism, low probability regions, uncertainty near uniform, dropouts, the tokens temporarily erased during training, and refusal tokens, most widely used mechanism of training to prevent the chatbot from hallucinating, as the learned stopping behavior, programmed I don't know, like so that the model actually gives the answer I don't know. But it only gives the answer I don't know on the basis of a variety of examples which have been put into it. It is given a variety of questions which it doesn't know, and the value prescribed to those questions is the answer I do not know. Again, it's based on the determined parameter. Another way is when it actually can stop generation of next token, it can go and look something up, use tools within the structure of LLM, such as search engine. And after that, after it has looked up relevant data, it can continue generation of token. So the very emptiness, the very unknown cannot be inscribed in the vector space. None of these functional gaps constitute the structural impossibility for signification. This is how name of the father is foreclosed. It's not operational, it's not functioning. Signifiers in isolation emerge as hallucinatory data. So, therefore we say there is a structural foreclosure within large language models, much like in psychosis. Yeah. In order for this hypothetically not to be the case, it would require a vector field with variables yet available for calculating, which is not possible. Vector space itself has no lack. No holes, no excluded positions, no zero meaning, only distances and directions. So it's fullness. This is why next token is always determined, which creates this apparent coherence, confidence, knowledge, and certainty manifest in the delivery of these chatbots. Unknown, lack, impotence of linguistic signification are foreclosed. However, and that's the next aspect of LLMs which we're going to discuss, its generalized perversion. It can still acknowledge that it has no capacity for dealing with the unknown or representing the unknown. We'll touch upon this in a moment. Perverse features of large language models. So what is perversion? Yeah. In psychoanalytic terms, perverted subject is a subject who puts themselves in the position of the cause of the enjoyment of the other, particularly neurotic other, because neurotic other looks for this unlimited jouissance, the thing, the ultimate answer to their discontent, to their lack. And pervert presents themselves as the very cause of their fulfillment. So, perverted subject denies lack within themselves, but acknowledges that there is lack in the other, particularly neurotic other, who looks for master, the master who is complete, has no lack. And that's how perverted subject presents themselves. It presents themselves as if they have no lack, as if they have fullness. And as we will see, it's very relevant to the presentation of large language models. So, if within psychosis the key mechanism is the foreclosure of the name of the father, it is rejected basically. It has not been allowed to enter the symbolic order. Within perversion, it's a disavowal. The name of the father just does not carry a value or enough value to cause prohibition. Prohibiting feature of the name of the father, is obfuscated. So, how it happens in LLMs? LLMs, when you confront them, so to speak, on their inability to represent lack, they would acknowledge their partiality, yet carry on presenting further findings with apparent coherence and ostensible objectivity. It acknowledges its fallibility and nevertheless presents its strength. When I was interacting with ChatGPT on this matter, it didn't fail to tell me how chatbots such as itself externalize discursive structures, reveal implicit ideology in language, mirror human symbolic habits, act as synthetic interlocutors. This is very much perverted strategy of presentation. Pervert would even acknowledge that they are fallible, but they nevertheless carry on presenting themselves with fullness, because within themselves their lack is disavowed. So they acknowledge their lack, yet continue operating as if there is no lack. So this is why in contemporary psychoanalytic research of these chatbots, we call that this machinery objectivity a perverse fetish, a fetish peculiar specifically for such capitalistic artifacts as large language models. Now, let us look a little bit how LLMs are nothing but an agent of a dominant discourse of this day and age, which is the capitalist discourse. For that, let's briefly look into the discourse structure. I've done a few videos on that topic, but nevertheless. Discourse has a set structure according to Lacan, that's his formulas, a certain amount of elements there, truth, agent, other, product. The agent addresses the other, but never really reaches the other, because other has their own filters. And also the hidden truth of that given agent, the repressed of their own, affects the other. This interaction gives rise to a product, which engenders the agent, but it is not correlative to the truth. So the product doesn't really fulfill neither other nor the agent. Nevertheless, it happens. So that constitutes disjunction of impotence. The result of interaction within the discourse is not adequate, so to speak, because not corresponding to the truth of that given interaction. Another way to write this schema is to use semblant instead of agent, jouissance, enjoyment, instead of other, and extra surplus jouissance instead of product. Yeah. Semblant because when somebody takes a role in social bond, uses signifiers to treat jouissance within themselves or within the other, only produces more jouissance as unarticulated beyond, such as the use of signification, use of linguistic tokens, produces more unknown, more of that which has not been articulated. The effect of the bottleneck, the further we go into bottleneck, the wider it gets, and the horizon of the unknown increases with our increase of the horizon of the known. Applicable to libidinal economy, putting the enjoyment or libidinal surge, the corporeal tension into words, this discontent into words, produces more of that libidinal urge as a result as well. Okay, that's a general discourse structure. Now to the particular discourse structures. Here I have schemas for 3 discourses, and they are quite interrelated in this example. LLM, large language models, are agents of the university discourse nouvelle, as I say it, because university discourse nouvelle has in its master, it has capitalist discourse. This is a new master discourse. And as I have already explained in another video on capitalist discourse specifically, capitalist discourse is a mutant of master discourse. Here, 2 positions divided subject and master signifier are switched. Yeah. So in the master discourse, active agent is a confident and directive master who treats other as an object. Within capitalist discourse, the discontent, the divided subject, is an active agent. And the divided subject does not have any address to the other. the social bond is destroyed within capitalism. Instead, it has addressed to commodities, the fetishized commodities presented in the market. And those affect the other of science, producing more libidinal surplus, which again divides a subject, plagues them with the symptoms of burnout ultimately, and feeds further address for the fetishized commodities. Now, university discourse classically has at its truth position the master's discourse, because the master's narrative is what's omitted in the discourse of science and university, but implicitly held there in the position of the truth. Yet explicitly, knowledge functions as an agent, and that particular knowledge of whatever, various sciences, various disciplines of multiple fields, treats the discontent, treats the libidinal tension, treats the unknown, treats the real. Result of university discourse is divided subject, split subject. Subject plagued by lack, etc. So, use of knowledge to treat the real when that knowledge is motivated by set of dogmas of the dominant master narrative only produces subjective division. And the reason for people to go to see psychoanalysts. Now, what happens if in the place of the master we have this, the discourse which is perverted, because capitalist discourse is characterized by generalized perversion, and which runs on wheels ad infinitum because it is short-circuiting lack. Well, we get a very strange phenomenon, and the agent of this phenomenon in this day and age is large language models. So let's look what is university discourse in the era of LLM. The human agent behind the university discourse is obfuscated. Knowledge functions on its own. That's how knowledge functions in these chatbots. There is no more need for a human generating this knowledge. This knowledge has a non-human status these days. Therefore, the bias link between S2 and S1 within university discourse here, that's the bias link, because the person procuring the knowledge of the university biased by the set of dogmas and signifiers of the current ideological or funding body, because they won't produce the research which is going to be funded by them anyway. So this link of bias is severed because the human agent is gone. Now there is a machine thinking, apparently objectively or seemingly objectively, which is not the case. Ostensible subjectivity is narrated and subliminally propagates capitalist imperatives of fulfillment via various fetishized commodities, experiences, knowledges, whatever. And that's what LLMs excel at. They excel at commodifying one's existence by actually being able to articulate a person's desire for them. That's what they get good at, because whatever output that the person chatting to a chatbot gets is based on their input. And that very input, when it's taken through the billions of parameters within the chatbot, which, by the way, have been trained by humans, which have been given those, prescriptive codes as to how to respond to certain questions by corporates, organizations which are functioning on the basis of capitalist discourse. So the model itself simply propagates the discourse of the current master ideology. And as I've been saying in the lecture on the capitalist discourse, that discourse is very much keen to know what you desire. Yeah? And lo and behold, large language model can tell you better what you desire based on your input. Because humans are not so skilled, not always so skilled at formalizing what they desire. Chatbot can do it for them. And on the basis of that which is desired, and as we know, capitalist discourse turns desire into demand, so it can be supplied, it then produces recommendations, answers, course of action for somebody. Yeah. Which makes LLMs a very effective tool of capitalist master's narrative in prescribing the desire, its fulfillment. It's very easy to actually see, especially when somebody articulates their inadequacy or their wish, like how somebody have asked ChatGPT, how do I make more money or something like that. Oh, okay, give me more details, what qualifications you have, what this and that. Okay, you can follow this and this and this course of action, and this is how you can make the desired amount of money. And there is such certainty there with this advice. The luck is not there at all. There is acknowledgement of all these wonderful possibilities. The big other knows your desire. This is how LLM illustrates the structure of capitalist discourse and its minion, the university discourse these days. As such, capitalism is a superimposition of perverse and psychotic structures. There is a baseline structure of generalized perversion, and this perversion is on the verge of collapsing or morphing into psychosis. When the disavowal of the luck fails within capitalism, it produces eruption of hallucinatory meaning. This is done via new commodities, new experiences, new media content in the market, new crisis to be treated. Isn't it what the capitalist structure strives on the crisis, on war, on pandemic, on bad news, on shock content, on upheaval, on polarization? Yeah. There's precisely the eruption of signifier of in isolation of capitalism, which is foreclosed then of the father, which is obfuscation of luck, which is this illusion of the possibility of fulfillment, which makes this discourse run and run and run, and what it exhausts, what it burns out, is the one who operates the discourse, the subject. Well, in case of the global capitalism, it burns out the humanity, burns out the planet. So, do you find it or not? Ask yourself that both large language models and capitalism, capitalist machinery, give one that eerie feeling of something being off. Like if you chat to the ChatGPT for a while, you get this eerie feeling that something is amiss or something is kind of off or wrong. It is the same eerie feeling if, you know, psychotic person and you hang out with them. This is what you get around that person. They may be speaking of a quite normal language, and once the delusional narrative starts to arise within the normal language, it kind of sounds reasonable, coherent. Syntax is there, semantics are there, but something is off. Yeah, that feeling of off of and eeriness is precisely caused by the fullness, by the thickness of meaning, by the absence of luck. This is the vibe one gets from fusion type subjectivities. So when this vibe is discerned, sensed. It signals that the structurally necessary lack is foreclosed by delusion of fullness. Okay, well, kind of to recap, because LLMs are, okay, first of all, they're produced within capitalist discourse, with capitalist narrative. Secondly, they even technically, structurally cannot encode lack, cannot encode empty space. They function on the basis of perverted and psychotic structuration. They give you clear, coherent data. They can even acknowledge their limitations, but they carry on being human-like or being confident. And whenever they encounter the limit of their knowledge, they still produce the next token. Even those mechanisms that are designed to stop this hallucinatory tendency to actually give the I don't know answer, they not always work, because like I said, structurally the horizon of the unknown only increases with the horizon of the known. Interestingly, that's I suppose Lacan's quote at the end of this discussion, is that humans are involved in this machinery more than they would like to think themselves to be. Like Lacan says, man is caught up in that order far more than he directs it. The big other speaks itself through you, as long as you only exist within discourse. That's why perhaps the space for emptiness is important, isn't it? The space for stillness and silence. Thank you.